Hi everyone, and welcome to the 6 p.m. talk. So every Wednesday at 6 p.m. in Bali, it's Bali time. I give a short talk. It's on various topics related to mental health, anything that is about raising awareness, to basically break the stigma around mental health. So we talk about different things. But what's important to know and just to keep in mind is that what I'm sharing represents my own clinical opinion over 20 years and those of my guests, because sometimes I have guests, like today we have a special guest who's going to be joining us in a moment. And so just to know that all the information that's shared is personalized, and it doesn't replace the professional advice that some of you might need. So that's really important, that if for whatever reason you're feeling unwell, that it's important to consult with someone, a specialist in your area. So let me just quickly invite our guest right now. Hi everybody. Let's see. Oops. Daisy. Okay, so just a second. All right, so we have a special guest who's going to be joining us, and he's a clinical psychologist and an integrative psychotherapist with 7 years of practice in mental health. I'm just waiting for him to join us, then he'll tell us a little bit about himself. And so today we'll be talking about the topic of social anxiety and the difference between that and shyness. Of course, they're very different. So it's a nice, interesting conversation we're going to be having together. So just waiting now for Philip to join us. Hi, everybody. So of course, if you have any questions, then just don't hesitate just to write them, comment. And this is just an informal conversation. Right, I think that Philip is having some trouble to join. Try again. Okay. All right, so just waiting. While we're waiting for Philip to come along, so the topic that we're going to be covering is something that affects us in many respects. Actually, just this you know, how we feel when we're going to be, let's say, doing something for the first time, meeting someone for the first time, or meeting a group of people for the first time, or let's say even having a presentation or going to do a presentation. These are all kind of experiences that we may be having and we might be confronted with in our different fields, and that can be producing all kinds of natural stresses and make us kind of nervous, and this is something that's quite usual to experience because we're social beings, and as social beings we tend to give some importance to what other people think. I think we're just having a bit of trouble getting Philip in. Again, we're going to try again. And so basically it's quite normal, as I was saying, like as social beings, it's important what other people think, or we give importance to that. And so that makes it very, it creates this pressure for us to have to perform. And we experience that to various degrees. You know, some of us might experience this in a very light form, and for other people it might be more severe. All right. Okay, maybe Philip, all right, maybe you, if we can just do it the other way around, maybe you can just send a join request my way, and then this way we can try to bring you in if that's happening. So if you can hear me, just try to request to join in, and then I'll add you. So whenever we find ourselves in a situation where we're going to be presenting something, it's normal to be experiencing certain aspects of nervousness, and that has nothing to do with being shy. It's quite different. And we'll be talking about these things. I mean, I'm hoping that Philip is going to be able to join us so that we can actually cover this. On another note, I'd like to also say that actually during the month of April, it's Counseling Awareness Month. So it's also an opportunity to basically, break the stigma around mental health, but also to kind of talk about, the benefits of therapy, the benefits of counseling, and how this can really help whenever we feel stuck in our life, and whenever we feel overwhelmed, or whenever we feel quite anxious, to the point that it's affecting our functioning. And this is the topic that we'll be having right now. So Philip was just meant to join us. I'm hoping that he will. I'll try. Just Philip, if you can hear me, just send me a request to join in the talk. And I'm just wondering if some of you have experienced like anxiety or social anxiety to some degree, or if you are actually suffering from social anxiety, to actually mention it. Okay, so we have Philip. Great, fantastic. So hopefully it's going to connect this time. Hello, Philip.
Hello.
All right, great. It worked.
Technical difficulty finally worked. Hello.
That's okay.
Really happy to be with you, and thank you, Jeremy, for inviting me to be with you.
Yes, you're so welcome, and it's really nice to have you. So we're gonna take it one step at a time. We know the difficulties that we can encounter, with the internet still in the connections. So hopefully everybody's gonna bear with us with that, and of course it's lovely to have you here today. So I was just I was just telling everybody at the beginning that just a little bit about yourself, that you have 7 years of mental health experience working in the field, and I thought it would be a wonderful opportunity just to share and have a conversation about a topic that I think is something that concerns us all to some degree, to some extent, and it's always nice to exchange thoughts with other colleagues in the field, and of course we all have our different experiences, so it's nice to share a little bit of what's about this. And so yeah, perhaps you can just share a little bit with the audience now. I mean, just share a little bit about who you are.
Of course. So my name is Philip Noun. I'm a clinical psychologist and an integrative therapist. I'm also a technical advisor on health and psychosocial support. I've been doing several things, but for the purpose of this video, it would be the psychologist who's speaking, the clinical psychologist. And I have experience working for many years with refugees, many of which were suffering from social anxiety. So it's indeed a topic that I very much like to talk about and sensitize people to. And so thank you again for inviting me, Jeremy. And as you said before, this is definitely not meant to replace any kind of need sometimes for clinical professional help. So these are just, whatever we discuss today are just things related to our clinical experience and maybe tips of things that might be helpful to some. But if these tips don't work out, don't worry, you're not on your own, and you're not supposed to, if you suffer from social anxiety, you're not supposed to go through this on your own, and support exists out there.
Yes, absolutely. It's that's really a key element for sure, is for people to know that they can actually reach out for help. Perhaps we can just start by talking a little bit about, like I was just saying at the beginning, that there's some degree of let's say angst or nervousness that we can all be experiencing when we're about to do something that is maybe new, or meeting somebody new, or being in a group. Of course, there's different situations, and just the difference between that and what social anxiety as an impairment is. And perhaps, I don't know what your thoughts about this are, and what your experience in this as well is.
Um, I mean, I think that in general, as the world has come to the understanding that it's not just about whether you have a disorder or you don't. We're all on the continuum somewhere, and we might have, some of us might have struggles more than others. And when these struggles start impacting our functioning and our ability to continue living a healthy life, that's when this struggle becomes a disorder. But when we talk about this topic, many of us might be able to identify with some of the struggles that we will be discussing to different degrees. And but the maybe the first thing that I'd like to say is that social anxiety is definitely not about being shy. It's much more than that, and it's a real struggle. It's a real struggle for some, and
Right.
yeah, we can maybe talk a bit about what the struggle might look like.
I mean, what is, like, what are the typical kind of symptoms that a person with social anxiety, what experiences will they be having?
Um, I would say it's a really a tendency to avoid being around people who they're not comfortable being around, avoid crowded places, avoid being in social situations where they might be the center of attention, um, maybe avoiding going out in any place that where they might have to interact with people, because it really, this social anxiety stems from maybe a fear of sometimes irrational fears of accidentally offending someone, fears of maybe being judged by others in social situations, even with very small basic things like the way I'm sitting, or the way I look, or the way I'm dressed, or the way maybe the way I'm looking around in the room. So
Mm,
it also
mm,
stems from fear of being, again, the center of attention, um, or of feeling embarrassed, maybe. Sometimes this fear of being embarrassed, and it showing in the
mm,
form of blushing or shaking. So these are, as a person that suffers from social anxiety might um, be preoccupied with all these fears and thoughts while being out. Things that usually people that do not suffer from social anxiety to any degree would not necessarily understand. So they would just say, I mean, come on, just go out. What are you worried about? But we wish it were that simple.
Yes, of course, of course, because there's all these physiological symptoms that they're experiencing that can be so overwhelming. It's like little details, like you were talking about, like the blushing. It's obviously there's the temperature. There's maybe a lot of sweating happening. Maybe the hands become kind of moist, and I guess to some extent, for example, if we're going to be doing something for the first time, there's we say that there's nothing like a first impression, and sometimes this can be putting so much pressure on us. But then, for, let's say, we know that we're gonna be doing something important, and maybe we're feeling a little bit of having the hands moist, and maybe we're feeling just a little bit tense and nervous because we want to perform properly in that moment. But then it kind of fades away somehow. But for a person with social anxiety, they might actually be thinking about it maybe weeks or months before it ever occurs, and it's like an endless ordeal that kind of never ends. And so the symptoms are just so much more profuse. And there's a lot of, I guess, a lot of maybe irrational thoughts that are actually going there, because what are people going to think? It's like all their focus is on what other people are actually going to be thinking about how they perform.
Yeah, yeah, as you're saying. And although another thing that we need to say here is that social anxiety is not being scared of public speaking. It's it's much more than that. But we'll use this public speaking as an example to what a person with social anxiety might be feeling at all times when they're surrounded with people. So it's as if we have any one of us might have experienced stage fright at some point, and so I go up on stage and I'm just sweating, and I feel like I lose my words. I'm shaking. I have prepared something to say, and now I don't know how to say it, and and so social anxiety is an anxiety disorder, and just like any anxiety disorder, it's a combination of maybe psychological symptoms and physiological symptoms. So what we mean by that is a combination of a struggle that's going on in my mind, these irrational thoughts, these fears, but also a strong imbalance that happens in an agitation that happens in my body that keeps me on edge and unable to function, because I feel like I need to get out of here. I need to escape. I need to. I'm not in a safe place, and this is what would drive people with social anxiety to maybe sometimes stay at home, or not necessarily at home, but avoid social gatherings, and so would
Yes.
also drive them to maybe say no a lot of times to plans, and which also impact the relationship they have with their friends who do not understand this. And I think that I don't know if you have something to say at this point, but one thing that I thought about sensitizing, that important to sensitize everyone to, is really trying to understand better the people that suffer from social anxiety, and know how to our friends who might suffer from this to a certain extent, to know how to accept them for who they are, and really try to connect with them in a way that makes them feel safe, or in a place that makes them feel safe. So saying no to a plan with 5 or 10 people would not necessarily mean that they would say no to a one-to-one
Interaction
that they might be thirsting for.
Yes, 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 but they're looking for perhaps more of a opportunity that feels perhaps more safer for them, and they don't know how to do it, or they struggle to do it by themselves. I mean, of course, I guess it's important to know that there's different. It's like social anxiety is like on a spectrum. Wouldn't you say? Like for some people, I mean, it can affect them to a certain extent, but not everybody is affected in a similar way.
Definitely. And I guess this is what I meant at the beginning when we said it's not whether I have it or not. I'm on this
Yeah.
continuum, I'm on this spectrum somewhere, and yeah, it's even those that do not are very sociable people might have might experience things related to social anxiety with certain types of outings, let's say.
Yes. But I suppose that the moment we're going to be using the term like social anxiety impairment, social anxiety disorder as a disorder, that we classify it that way is usually when a person is really affected, that their functioning is affected in a severe way, right? This is the when we might be using such a term.
Yeah, and maybe
Yeah.
thank you for clarifying this, so that maybe throughout we now focus really on the actual disorder, on the struggles faced by people who really suffer from this disorder, and not just
Yes.
from symptoms
Yeah.
of it.
Yes, yes. I mean, there's a term that's typically used, I'm sure you know, is like this perceived audience. like this perceived audience. It's like something that they is there, even though, I mean, of course, you might find yourself in front of an audience, you know, like it could be 2 people, you know, like it could be 100 people, you know. But then for a person with social anxiety, there's always this kind of image that is kind of, there's the perceived audience. There's always an audience that's there, that is
Mm-hmm.
actually affecting them. So they prefer to maybe, as you said, they will prefer to avoid. That will lead to kind of like self-isolation, and it will impact their life in so many ways. I mean, you were talking a bit earlier about something that has to do with maybe, I mean, I guess to broaden on the question of what is it you, in your opinion, like contributes to a person developing a social anxiety?
I mean, just like any anxiety disorder, there
Mm,
definitely is, and other disorders in general. Usually, there is a kind of predisposition that a person might have
mm,
related to certain genes.
mm,
But it's never just about this. It's about triggers that happen in our lives, uh, and circumstances and things associated with our very early incidents in our lives and our
mm,
first years of our life. I
mm.
mean, I don't think we can pinpoint it to one thing. It's
Yeah,
always
of
a combination of
course,
two things. But
multiple things.
but what could really contribute to the development of social anxiety is very early on teasing,
Mm,
bullying,
mm,
rejection, ridicule, humiliation, that comes from that can come sometimes from one's own parents or from their peers, and that might continue for a while, where it's not
mm,
just a one-off incident that
mm.
that that teaches a person that the world is, or people are not always safe. Uh,
Safe. Yeah, it's threatening.
it's
More like
threatening.
threatening. Yeah. I mean, even in school, it could even be teachers as well, I suppose, right? Even though they might not necessarily have that as an intention, it could also happen in that way, right? And perhaps like the words or the approach that the teacher might have towards a child that might have a certain predisposition, as you were saying, or could it be that there's might be like certain personality traits that might maybe make certain people more likely to develop a social anxiety condition, or not necessarily?
Uh, I mean, yeah, I think so.
Mm,
Personally, I think so. I think some people are more anxious than others, and it's
hmm
also related to their personality type.
mm,
Different different therapists tend to not believe in theories of
mm,
personality.
yes.
I'm someone that has found the Myers-Briggs personality inventory to be very a powerful tool. So
Yes.
I
Yes,
would
indeed.
agree. Anxiety is somewhat related also to certain personality types, and that's why we also know that um, yeah, these personality types are more prone to develop certain anxiety disorders.
Mm,
But it's also, besides just if we want to attribute it also to what's happening in a person's life, family conflict, trauma, abuse are also all associated with social anxiety.
mm,
Um, and But that's not to say that the person is uh, doomed. Any
mm,
person that suffers from any kind of disorder can learn how to manage this disorder, or manage these struggles to live a healthier life where they're less their functioning is less impaired.
mm,
And in the end, it would be about preferences. So some people who suffer from social anxiety might learn how to cope with this social anxiety, but that doesn't mean that they will get to a place where they necessarily would like to be in
mm,
crowded places. They might their preference might be to always be in smaller social groups,
mm,
although they
mm.
learned how to uh,
Yes.
manage symptoms.
Yes, I suppose that's why, let's say, a person who's more like of an introverted type, who prefers more of like their alone type, doesn't necessarily mean that they can't speak in public. They can still speak in public in that respect. In the same way that an extroverted person who's very open and out there could also actually themselves be suffering with some, you know, a lot of nervousness and social anxiety as well, I suppose.
Hmm. Yeah,
Mm,
yeah, completely.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I mean, I don't know how much time we're left with, but one thing that I also wanted to talk about is if anyone watching is actually suffering from social anxiety and they haven't yet had the courage to reach out, or maybe they're trying to manage these struggles on their own, or maybe some of the people here with us know someone that suffers from social anxiety, that there are things that the person can do to take control of this anxiety, to learn how to manage it. Um, and so maybe we can talk a bit about this. What do you think, Jeremy?
Yes, yes, of course, we can talk about this. I think that we have a question here that someone has just asked, is asking, is it learned or is it inherited? I suppose that it's you know, probably as Philip was saying, it can be a combination of things. You know, there's something we call technically the biopsychosocial model, which means that there's a biological explanation, there's a psychological explanation, emotional explanation, and a social environmental explanation that can actually be contributing factors to develop something like this. So yes, so because I mean, we are within the time, so don't worry so much about that. That's totally fine. Talking about like the different things that we can actually suggest to people would actually be quite very useful. Definitely. What would you like to actually suggest in terms of what do you have in mind?
I mean, one of the first things that I have in mind is to really challenge this avoidance
Mm,
that a person might be feeling when it comes to social gatherings, any kind of social gatherings, whether those are limited to two people or more, or whether it's a bigger group. So challenge. What does it mean to challenge your avoidance? Is that everything within you is telling you people are gonna judge you. You're gonna feel embarrassed. You're gonna blush. People will notice that you're not okay, and so if you give in to these thoughts and you actually decide not to go, then the next time there is a similar occurrence, you probably experience the same thoughts again. Just like if we want to compare it to something, if you go to a place where you get caught in a big traffic jam, and the next time someone tells you, "Would you come with me to this place?" you probably think, there's always a traffic jam there. So the only way that this idea will change is if you go there another time, and this time there isn't a traffic jam. Then you can base this um, your decision next time on the knowledge that not every time there will be a traffic jam. So uh, in a
mm,
similar way, someone that suffers from social anxiety, if they're always worried about the worst happening, if they
yes.
actually uh, av- avoid this avoidance, they challenge it, and they actually try to go, and it ends up being a good time there, then it would be easier the next time and one after, etc. But
Yes.
in parallel
Mm,
to this, starting small, you have to start small. You
mm.
can't just, you have to know yourself and to try attending to yourself by taking it one step at a time.
Yes, of
Uh,
course. So it's more like adopting a growth, a kind of a growth orientation to life, meaning that it's everything's not perfect. It's more like stages of learning, and that perhaps there's such a high level of expectation that a person has, and maybe working on kind of maybe challenging that level of expectation that they might have that pushes them towards some kind of maybe of too high level, a level that becomes a bit unrealistic, like a level of perfectionism, and perhaps maybe to challenge that that kind of mindset, like you were actually saying, taking it one step at a time, maybe through easy challenges, and going step by step, and knowing that this is a trial and error experience, because life is a trial and error
Mm-hmm.
experience.
Yeah.
That as humans, nobody is perfect,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think this is an important point.
definitely. I completely agree with you. And yeah, manage your expectations from yourself. Yeah.
Yes.
Other things would include also, I mean, talking back to these negative thoughts, because if you want to
Mm.
manage kind of anxiety, you need to also manage what's going on in your mind. So really speak with yourself, challenge these negative thoughts how it won't
Yeah.
work, the worst will
Mm.
happen. And
Mm. I think what yeah.
practical, yeah, no, go ahead, please.
There was just something I wanted to share with you along this line, is that when we're in the struggle, usually we will be focusing on what we're struggling from, and usually we're going to be focusing a lot on the symptoms and on the feeling of anxiety, and the
Mm-hmm.
feeling the feeling that we're having. And one of the really interesting aspects, perhaps, could be, instead of focusing on the feeling and on the negative outcome of what you might be experiencing again, because you've had it so many times before, is maybe to kind of bring your mind's attention towards what you value mostly. And if you bring your value most, for example, towards I value human connection, despite my fears, that becomes like a more constructive driver, as opposed to I'm too afraid for this, something terrible is going to happen, I'm going to have all these symptoms again, and it's not going to work because maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe something bad's going to happen, and so on and so forth. So instead of attending to my fear, it's more of maybe bringing my attention to what I value most. And what's really important to me right now is I value human connection, and that's why I'm doing this. So my purpose is more of a constructive purpose, as opposed to what I'm afraid of, which is actually the perpetuating factor in many respects.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I completely agree. You're getting into more details about how to challenge these negative thoughts by giving practical things to
Mm,
really reflect on and think about when this is happening.
mm,
And along the lines of what you're saying, if we also want to focus not just on the mind but on the body, it's also learning how to manage this anxiety in my body. So controlling my breathing, trying maybe progressive muscle relaxation uh, to be able to relax in this situation where I feel super stressed, or in this place where I'm feeling super stressed. Um, Sometimes getting to a place uh, early would also help a person that suffers from social anxiety to feel better, because then they can see people arriving one person at a time, and so it's not just them walking into a crowd where they don't know anyone. Um, uh, to
mm.
some, also about not knowing how to do a small talk. So sometimes staying up to date just on small current events, or maybe telling yourself that, okay, I maybe talk about the weather, or there are a few things that I know I can talk about, so, and have them in mind, so that if someone approaches me, I'm able to resort to these, so that I don't feel super anxious. Another thing I wanted to stress out is that some people use alcohol or other drugs to deal with their
As
social
a
anxiety,
coping,
as a
it's true.
coping, because their
It
inhibition,
yeah, yeah.
their, yeah.
Is this something that we see more in men than in women, in terms
So
of that, in
I
that
I
type of
personally,
coping? Mm.
yeah, I personally, with social anxiety, I don't know the trends about drinking. Um, would you know? Do you know
Well, it
about?
seems like from studies that it seems to be like the coping mechanism generally, that men seem to be leaning towards. At least that's from the what I've read. Okay, but
Okay.
I know there's for that in terms of prevalence rates, there seems to be like women seems to be more prone to having anxieties in general, and seems to be having more maybe even social anxiety, much more than men for some reason. But in terms of the coping, the most widely seen coping mechanism is that of drinking and substance use. Seems to be more with men than it is with women.
Yeah,
But that's something I think to look into a little bit more. But that's from from what I know recently.
yeah.
Yeah.
And but I would say, I mean, of course, both would be at some point could be prone to this, or to using substance and alcohol to manage these anxieties. And so, I mean, we have to really advise against this, because this can
Hmm.
relieve you in the instant, but this could become your coping mechanism, and in the long run, it could be causing you to suffer more, and to really
Mm.
need this substance to be able to be disinhibited and manage your anxiety. And so try to stay away from alcohol, and try to instead learn how to cope with these with these thoughts and these symptoms. So things
Mm.
like regular exercise and healthy food intake. You were saying biopsychosocial. So going back to the bio would
Yes.
really could really help a person um, prepare before you.
Mm. Mm.
Of course, seek help if you need it.
Yes. Yes. Yes, of course. These are really sound advice,
Um,
really important for anybody out there to have and to know for sure. Yeah. Philip, there's just one more thing I'd like to say before we reach the end. I don't know, there was this very interesting study that I'd like to share with everyone here. Is it was published at the end of last year, so in October 2020, where they were looking in terms of the production of oxytocin in the brain. And oxytocin is a hormone that can also act as a neurotransmitter. I mean, these are technical words, but we know that it's associated with empathy, feeling trust, and also a kind of something they call the love hormone. But through this study, they found out that there is an antisocial aspect to this oxytocin production in certain parts of the brain. And that might explain a little bit why maybe why what is happening with some of us, okay, some people who have this social anxiety disorder, that it might have to do something with oxytocin production in certain areas of the brain. And this study was done with a group of mice in the U.S. in California, and they saw that by injecting oxytocin in that specific part of the brain that seems to be responsible for what's going on, that these mice started to display these kind of antisocial type of behaviors, although they were, stress-free before. So it's interesting science to know a little bit more about really what's going on, and maybe the role of some medication in potentially helping, some people who have this severe degree of symptoms.
Super interesting. I mean, myself coming uh, from a neuroscience, I'm fascinated by these things, and I feel that it's definitely uh, are getting to a very nice age now, where we are learning so much more about the brain, and this is ultimately feeding into the development of medication. And reductionists would say psychology can be reduced to biology, biology can be reduced to chemistry, and chemistry is where this what you're talking about happens. And the medication and
Yeah.
fixing this brain to avoid this. And then it goes on to say chemistry can be reduced to physics, physics reduced to math, and mathematicians talk directly to God. So it's,
Nice.
yeah, it's so what maybe also, I mean, along the lines of what you're talking about, this social anxiety many people that suffer from social anxiety end up also needing maybe psychiatric help or medication to manage this anxiety. This you should never self-medicate. It's not a decision that you or even your psychologist takes. It's a decision that the psychiatrist takes after learning a lot about your struggles and the history of your struggles. But for people that end up needing medication, it's because oftentimes it's also related to an imbalance in these neurotransmitters in your brain. But a combination of medication and therapy and talking about this and learning how to manage this anxiety is what evidence shows is the most effective. So even if you end up needing medication, always remember that you can help yourself by learning how to cope better.
Great. This is super important. Philip, it was we're gonna come to the end today, because we try not to exceed a little bit too long. I mean, of course we can always, I mean, this is a subject that we can, I mean, it's lovely talking to you, and I think that we can go on and on with this.
Likewise, Jeremy.
I think there's something we have to do this again, and I'm sure it will be nice to have this like perhaps more often.
Yes,
I think.
Sorry for the technical difficulties.
No worries. And plus, you're located in Lebanon, correct?
Yes, that's
in
right.
Beirut. Yeah. And okay. And I suppose that how are things going there? Very rapidly. How are things over there at the moment?
In brief, the situation isn't very good. There's been a big economic collapse, and but we hope for the best.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I suppose, I mean, I hope so too. I think the world is in a weird place at the moment. I suppose Lebanon is much more vulnerable than others. So I'm really hoping that things will be the light will shine somehow. For everybody who's there.
Thank you. Same to the people in Bali and to yourself.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot. So, all right. So, what was I going to say? I know that, so if anybody actually is looking for even a therapist, I don't know if you work online, Philip, but I suppose that if people are interested, they can find out more about you just by looking into the links that we're offering, and we've been putting there on your Facebook page and things like that. All right, so we've reached the end of today, and we hope that you have found the talk interesting. I mean, I surely did, and hopefully, having these conversations with other colleagues and from different parts of the world is also something that is always very enriching. I mean, I find it enriching. Hopefully you do too. And most important thing is that whatever we talk about here is our clinical opinion. It doesn't replace, what you might need specifically. So it's really important just to know that if you're not feeling well, is to reach out for the right help. And if you have any questions, you can ask us, you can ask me, and then we'll reply as soon as we can. I know somebody else had asked about claustrophobia. I did see the message. I think that's it's a great topic. We can leave that for another time. And if you're feeling like you're struggling with it, please don't hesitate to reach out for help, because there's specialists who can help you for that. So thank you for listening, and for following, and for sharing, and we'll be having another talk next week. Yes, Philip, you wanted to say one more thing?
I want to say again, thank you, and way to go for this beautiful thing that you have going, and for inviting the therapists from around the world to be with you. And yeah, just one last message, that whatever we were discussing is really, in clinical terms, sometimes we're just barely scratching the surface of the discussion and of what really goes on. So if you feel that you've listened to this and you're trying to apply it, or trying to convince someone and it's not working, maybe that's a sign that you don't need to do it on your own, and that professional help can help you a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you, Philip. All right.
Thank you, Jeremy. Have a good rest of the day.
Yeah, thank you. They're going to be the evening for me now.
The evening, yeah. Right.
All right. Okay, so you have a nice rest of your day. Yeah, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Take care.
Everyone.
Bye.